Alright, it's working. Alright.
Oh, it's not yet. Okay,
Alright, here we go.
we started.
Yep, it's good. It's
It
live.
is 5 o'clock and we call this water and sewer committee to order. Randy had informed me that both Randy and Brian informed me they were not gonna be able to make it. Fortunately, Brian got called out for work early this morning, so I would motion for them to be excused. Second. All in favor of the excusing Randy and Brian, please say aye. Aye. And go right from the top, start with water tap and Van Buren.
Yeah, so I can give a little and then I'll kind of give the high over and then if you kind of want to. So, we were contacted by Rick Wagner to, this property right here. So it's a flag property, pretty much. So you got a property in front and then the way it is pretty much an easement going back to another property behind it. So it was split at one time. He's wanting to bring water back to these two, I guess if you want to say structures back here. This is currently what we have out here. We have a 10-inch water line that is out there. This dotted line is an existing utility easement that is running down through there. So that's kind of established through there. He's wanting to tap to these. Of course, you know, the easiest way is always the shortest way possible, but through our water regulations, we always require properties to go to their farthest point. So that way, if this property ever develops where they are wanting water, they're not crossing in front of two properties. So when I was talking to Rick about that, you know, I understand that, you know, this would be the easiest for that, but I said, I got to follow my policy on that and what we have to do. And I said, I wanted to bring in front of you guys, but we would have to do that. This is a large cost difference in it. And I understand, you know, it's the one property right now. I can't tell you if this property is ever going to develop, if it is or isn't, or if it's going to stay farmland, but in the future, why we always do that is it protects the next property so they're not crossing additional. And with his request, and if you want to fill in any more, it's pretty much to allow him to pretty much not extend all the way and just extend this water line service just right to here. Otherwise, if we follow our regulations, he would be required to do all engineering and construction to take that line all the way up to his farthest point. Once he does that, then it will be turned over to as a city main line, and we would provide him a tap. But for that, he would be required. So one bring in front of you guys, see what you guys thought. If there's anything you guys could kind of think on what we could do to help out, or what you guys thought of this.
Great, appreciate you letting me come in and talk with you. I know absolutely nothing about water and sewer.
Who is this, please?
Sorry, I apologize, Rick Wagner. Appreciate you, Finley guy,
Rick
just
Wagner.
have some real estate.
And you're the owner of the property?
Yes,
Okay, great.
it's a rental property for me. I don't live there, but it is a rental property and it's on a well and a septic, of which the backyard, the sewer line comes in. So I was gonna get direction. So if I get the city water, I'd like to talk about the tap into the sewer, which is in my yard, in the backyard.
Okay.
So that's number two. Just want to be clear that that first square out front is not my property. Mine is the access that comes in on the far side. That I understand the theory of running water in and then taking it to the next furthest point, north in this case. But I would rest with that if that was true and consistent, the water line would be there because the Home Depot did not, they stopped right at the property, so they did not extend to the north. So if we had that, it'd be another story. So if precedence is set that, you know, that didn't happen, but I'm just trying to get this, it makes a lot of sense to get it on city water if I could.
Excuse me, Jeremy, just as a point of order, does this fall in or outside of the contracted area within your?
I believe this is outside,
Thank you.
because this is west of 75.
So what size is the green line?
So so the green line is just like, that's option one,
You know
and the
what-
red line's option
Is it a
two.
2-inch or what?
I mean,
It's a
you would-
proposed.
yeah, those are just
that's
proposed lines.
proposed
There's
green,
nothing there right now.
proposed
I understand.
blues.
If you were
Um,
gonna do it, would just. be-
oh, he would need just a basic, I mean, nothing more than a 1 inch, I
Oh,
would think.
okay.
But that existing blue line is existing. That's a gate valve right there. That's a 10 inch.
And the red would be 10.
He would, yeah, it would have to go 10
10,
all the
okay.
way up.
And what's the cost differential?
More than $100,000.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's over 100,000 to run the water. And 10,000 to go the other way. It's 100 grand more to do it that way. And that, it's not my property. I just remind you that the centerpiece, the
Mhm.
square out front. And I went to two construction companies that actively do water with you and are licensed and bonded and all that. And their basic statement is, come talk to you, because in their opinion, it's not a fair proposal to do it that way. That doesn't, their thoughts don't matter. But an easement is exactly what it needs to have, and it has an easement which butts up in the property.
Can you pull that map so we can see south?
Of what's down this way.
and I'd like to see north too when you're done with that.
That's, I can't, I'll have to pull up our GIS real quick.
Okay.
I had to keep it on, PDF. Because of this. computer.
Scope.
So you say the sewer goes to the back of your property then?
Yes, so it'd be great if I could get
And the issues, so you're on well water then?
well and septic, right? Yeah, so because I don't know anything about the process while I'm here, I was gonna ask about the step to, and I'm sorry to take your time.
It's not sort of far away. Jim, why does the inside or outside Van Buren, how does that influence this?
So perfect question to ask, because I mean, should, as a formality, include in any motion that be verified. Van Buren has a contract with the city of Findlay that goes back years. And the contract not only states that they are in complete control of developing the water systems. But how much volume they get is strictly limited, and they are also aware that we are limited as a city in terms of what the volume is that we can provide long term. So they're concerned about drought, they're concerned about development. They have intentionally not extended certain lines beyond their borders that can't be developed. So if it's within their boundaries of their agreement, which extends, it's a township extension. But I don't know where the west boundary is, but if it would encompass any piece of ground, they control.
You're saying Van Buren doesn't go west of 75?
I don't believe I'd have to check, but we do have, and I missed what you were saying on that, but we do have, working with Van Buren, a set of procedures. If it's inside, outside their limits, if it connects to the main line on, what's that? Main Street, 220 going up, like what the procedures are with that, who gets payment, who gets paid what and all that. So after the last conversation we had, we sat down and we have letters with that, like stating, so we know if they get a call, if we get a call, these are the steps we got to do. And
Have we gone through those steps or not yet?
it's per the regulations of what's within that contract. So the first, I mean, is kind of which direction we're going to go on it, but it's a tap. But we'll have to follow, like, if they have to pay a rotary through Van Buren, there's multiple steps.
Okay, so no matter what we decide, he has to go through the steps.
We would still have to work, if it's within the Van Buren limit, then there would be a rotary with that, but we do have a list of procedures that Van Buren agrees with it, working with Ed. And then we also have law director and stuff working on that. So we do have procedures on what's the contract role with the city, Findlay, the county, Van Buren, all that. And that way, after that, we want to be consistent all the way through.
think what's our decision? You know, being the more expensive around with the road. Or, way cover costs and.
Pretty much that's what it looks like in that area.
My gut's telling me you're gonna find it's in there, but I don't.
I'm sorry, you go what's in?
My gut's telling me that it's probably. Shoot, since the other procedures, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so like that, I'm not worried about that because I've worked that out with Ted.
Okay.
So that way, like I said, we both know if someone like this does want to come in, it's within the service or not within the service. We know exactly what the steps are.
So per our rules, that's Home Depot, should Home Depot have taken it to the north side of their property or that?
I don't know what was the
I probably made a special.
Right,
deal to
and-
get 'em in there.
yeah, I'm not sure what.
Looks like their frontage isn't along
Yeah.
that township off there. Yeah, they don't have frontage there. It's probably why they stopped there.
Yeah, and
They put their front door there on purpose.
That's good. That's a good one. Yeah.
I think that was built in wait. Yeah, I'm not sure.
And that's been about 15, 20 years.
Mhm.
Why did they put the utilities on the south side of these two properties?
One thing I can think is, well, you're gonna have because of the sanitary, but if they were wanting to bring another feed up through this area, then they have a utility easement set up for that. But it's not just for water and sewer, it's straight utility, so it could be any kind of fiber lines or telephone lines.
Do you have the sanitary layer while we're talking about?
So let's just stay with water.
Well, okay, I missed.
I can't.
I mean, it's an interesting, you got the flag lot. Going,
Go on. How developable is that property to the north?
They're large farm grounds right now. So, farm ground can go one day, it's an industrial area, the next day, or it's gonna stay farm forever, or it's gonna be that, you don't know. One day it could change, or it could be farm forever.
I was guessing, 613 might be first due to the access points, but to his point, it's what
Yeah, right.
the buyer wants and what they want to
Price.
Right.
Exactly.
And there's also an interchange north of this as well as south that might be better. Who knows?
So I don't know, and this I've been kind of thinking about it too, and maybe Jim, you can kind of weigh in on it as well. If there's any kind of agreement or anything we can do that ties to this property, that, if you guys allow them to go on the south side and that property to the north ever develops, then they have to pay their portion of that within. I know there's the chance that he might be paying, say 10,000 and then additional costs later. But then if Rick ever decides to sell the property, then it would be tied with the property where he would have to pay that before he sells it off. I don't know. I'm trying to think of ways to kind of help protect the neighbor to the north, but also not have someone pay, $100,000 right now for water service.
what about the property that he flags around? Don't they have a liability? Don't they
So,
skin in the?
So yes, so it would be the same thing with them. They would, if they tap, it would be set up like a rotary where they would have to pay a portion of it. So at the end of the day, I'm gonna go back to this.
Is there a house?
This property and this property, we'd be sharing the cost. So that way, if they decide to build, it's pretty much everyone is paying their own portion. So we would set it up as a rotary for that.
Which of those two squares is the house on that?
The red and or are you talking in?
No, I'm on the other property.
This is the house and then this looks like a garage structure.
Okay, that's the house. Okay, so to get to that house, you'd have to build the red with dashed line or?
Yeah,
Could
they
they
would,
come
they would
off
have
the
to
green?
extend it up to there
Okay.
now. Yeah, you would have to extend it up this way anyways.
Have you talked to that property owner there?
I have not.
Or have you talked to that property?
No,
Rotary, Jeremy, would be on primarily based on frontage, correct?
So with the flag, it's a little different because then you don't, yeah, it would, the flag is set up a little different formula, so that way they're both sharing almost, yeah.
Sorry. I went-
I kind of like that idea. I guess I'd be in favor of doing the,
Even if you did the red line, why wouldn't you just want a 1 inch line on that green? Cost you less. I mean, even if you extend it up that way, it would still be less expensive. Even if you were up there, and then you said, okay, let me get to my house, it'd still be less expensive to go do the line.
Right, it
The red-
still
the
would
red
be,
is the
but he
the
would
red-
still be required to run that up
the
because,
red square is the house?
yeah, red square's the house. So yeah, instead of backtracking, you wouldn't want to go that way anyways, but section 5 of our water reg says it must be extended to the farthest property point. So that way the neighbor to the north is not extending past your property again. Because if there was say a house right here and he ran it just here, now they're paying to go in front of 2 properties where
No, I'm
they would
saying-
never eat.
I'm saying,
Right, yeah,
he bites the bullet and does the red line and spends $100K. And then says, now I need to bring water to the red house.
this is,
He's still gonna run it that way.
yeah, this is the cheapest
Right.
option for
Because
them.
otherwise he's gotta go down his driveway and come back
Right,
at double the cost. So he's still gonna do that either way.
right.
So I'd be in favor.
So why not just, yeah. Do the agreement that if the person on the north ever wants it, they all share.
Right, so go with the green line. And then do an agreement.
We have to agree to we just have to give them the tap.
Yeah, we would just have to give him the tap and then I would have to have an agreement to put in the property file. That would be recorded, so then if he ever sells it off in the next 5 years. And it, then it would have to be tied with that property, pretty much. Cause I don't want, in 5 years, to say he sells it off and then all of a sudden next buyer comes and they don't know about it.
Why 5 years? What did?
I'm just
Okay, it would
throwing
stay
out,
with the
yeah.
property
It would
forever.
stay with it, yeah, but I'm saying if we don't have that and say,
Yeah.
we're
No,
all not here.
Yeah.
I gotta have that type of property, so
Right.
the next people that are sitting
Right.
here.
forever.
understand that,
Yeah,
correct.
so if that ever is developed, then there's a cost sharing between those two properties on the future. So
Yeah.
you just gotta work through that language, I guess,
Right,
whatever that cost sharing looks like.
which, yeah, we can come.
So Rick, it gets you in business quickly, inexpensively, but there's a liability sitting out there on the property.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
How does that work for the road portion of it? If 5 years down the road, somebody builds just to the north of that thing, but what's the cost share?
So the way it's set up is pretty much, say they did not want water and this property had to bring it north. Then if they ever tie into that new line, they would have to pay their portion.
And what would their portion
Of
be?
what, there's a certain footage due to the size and their frontage. So pretty much, say that costs 100,000 to
Yeah.
extend it up there, then each of them would be paying 50,000. So that way the property to the north did not have the burden for the properties to the south of them.
But the property to the north doesn't have to then pay part of that?
Well, they would be responsible for the construction of it, but then we set up rotaries where they get pretty much reimbursed for that, so that way. They're, at the end of the day, everyone's paying for the portion of the water within their property.
Got it.
Yeah, so that way it's whole, but then they would be required to extend that
To the
To
north side.
the north side, wherever,
But that
all the way up
property-
to their
that
north.
property-
wherever they portion out.
Yeah.
That property to north has no responsibility to that first 100 grand though, right? I mean,
If they never tied in, they would have to pay for that cost until they tie in. Then once those properties tie in, then in order for them to tap, they would have to pay that rotary.
Jeremy, is there under that scenario, property to the north puts that red line in. Is under your current rules, is there a time limit on that rotary? Is it like 10 years?
It's 10 years. So that was the next thing I was gonna say is it's a 10-year limit. So if that property to the north, say runs that red line and they never tap for 10 years, then they pretty much lost, they lost that construction cost because it's outside.
Following up to that, under this scenario, he's tapping. He's essentially, under your scenario, agreeing to pay the 50 grand up front if the property to the north creates that line. Is that correct?
Or whatever that, whatever that
cost
costs.
is.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
So my question for you, Rick, is, if you were, able to that being in the deed so that it forwards on to the executors, ministers and signs of it, where you can sell that property.
I quite frankly don't have that answer, and I'm not trying to be invasive, but
Yeah.
the contingent liability of $50,000 when I just put in a water system and
Right.
trying to make the whole thing for $5,000 versus 100,000 up, 100,000 back. Then
I think you need to pencil out, we're throwing that number 50
Yeah,
out.
right.
We should try to pencil out.
I mean,
what actually
even at a third, and a third, just rough numbers. I mean, you guys do this every day. I mean, you still got 33,000 towards the program.
Is that hard for you to calculate? Is the percentage be?
No, I mean, I could come up, I mean, if he's got estimates already, but I mean, I could come up with what a cost would be, but it's still, I mean, it's going to be significant to have that held over that property.
Yeah, and then if he would agree, I would just suggest that any language be drafted by the Secretary of Law.
Yeah.
So that it was binding on
Yeah.
any. Yeah. Nothing's easy.
Yeah, and I really apologize taking you guys' time and.
That's what we do. Fair questions.
I really appreciate it. So I'll get some kind of email from you saying this is what we came up with.
Okay.
We haven't come up with anything.
Yeah, eventually. I didn't know that.
So if the inside property of that flag lot wants to tap, they can't just run down to Rick's green line, can they?
No,
So we have control over that green line on the right of way, is that ours?
well, we control where the tap is made because we make the taps.
So they can't tap off of his tap.
Mhm. And if, say, they were the ones, this one on the inside was the first ones, then we'd be in the same scenario where I would require them to come up to this point.
The only what if to that grant is new elected officials, new administrations, new proposals. And something they can come in and say, hey, this is here. I realize you guys want to keep open for farm ground. I realize you got rules. I'm asking for exceptions so that there could be exceptions. It's not the intent, but it can happen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, not on the
Not on the
surface line.
surface line.
You're saying main line.
On the main line, there would be, but that green line turns into his service line. And you wouldn't,
So you don't
You-
allow on the service line at all, right?
No, we don't allow.
And that's per your rules. That's
Yeah.
what said
Yeah.
the Ohio law.
no, that's per our rules. We
So the
don't,
rule, that's my point. In other words, if it's just our rule, a rule could be changed.
How would you know?
Not that you would, but
well, because we make all the taps in our system. So we wouldn't,
So no plumber would do that.
no,
No, we tap our line, then we run to a meter, then they come to our meter.
yeah,
Yeah.
certainly take the city, taking an action.
Right.
It's always.
I mean, because we have to set the setting. So
Where would this meter be on this?
it would be, if we were doing this, his meter would be out by the valve. It wouldn't be back by his property.
Here.
It'd be up there, because we would view it, if we made the tap there, the setting would go there, and then he would be responsible for all the line in the easement up to his house.
So, okay,
And he would bring that line to us.
got it. So if it springs a leak on that side.
That's
it's-
all on his.
So then you would see the increase of water anyway, even though
He's paying for it.
nobody would tap it.
Right.
Well, you don't want to get into the sub metering
See, cause that's that whole multi-minimum,
Yeah.
having multiple dwellings on 1 meter.
Need a motion.
Jeff, where you out on this?
I don't even know if we have enough here to make a decision. I mean, you guys are probably gonna come up with costs for him and then try to see if you won't even pursue it after that.
Well, we're just gonna make a recommendation. If we'll allow them to, work on the. I look at this, we have two choices, where you say we're gonna enforce our rules and the red line has to be developed regardless. Or we say, we're gonna make an exception to the rules and we're gonna say the red line. Either doesn't have to be done or has to be done in the event that the property to the north develops and wants water. I mean, is that,
Yeah, that, for
That's
us,
where I'm leaning.
if I had voted on some, that'd be what I would vote on.
so I'm good with the green, with letting the tap where he is, and then I think you just do it, like you said, legally, you tie something to the property that says, in the event something to the north happens, you gotta pull you up. Right. Okay. And that's a 10-year deal.
Yeah, it'd be, I mean, we almost set it up like a rotary.
And honestly, the percentages, I don't think we care about, right? I mean, that's like, that's,
I don't,
that's,
no, that's beyond us.
yeah, right.
Yeah, that's a-
then
it's
we're just
a-
gonna
it's
go with rotary.
Okay,
We're just saying, we're gonna delay the mandatory extension to the farthest point. Up until the time is the farthest point needs to happen.
Right.
Cause quite honestly, I look to the north there and I'm thinking, that's gonna. I don't think that's a likely place for a house and,
On the highway.
and,
Yeah.
it's an odd shaped piece of property. I think it's a pretty safe bet for 10 years.
So I can work that out with him and then he can decide if he wants to tap or not, and he's good with it, then we'll give him a tap permit. If not, then
Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate
that.
that. I know you got more important things to work on.
No, that was a fun
In
one.
there as far as what I do to add the sewer in the backside.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it and understand that you're doing the best you can for everybody, so. Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice to see you.
What are we rough recommending?
So we are recommending
Thank you.
that we're making an exception to our rule, right? To allow the service line to come off the south end of the property. Well, I hear
What
that
rule?
first.
What's the rule?
it was section 5 of water rules or water rights.
What year of the water act?
Current.
The rule 2025. Yeah, okay. Great. I don't know if you guys know, there's a house on Fish Lock that sits on top of our water main. And because the records weren't accurate enough, somebody was moving a house. They said, hey, we'd like to move this house on Fish Lock, and nobody had a record of it. They just plopped it right on top of our water main. Oh, and then they called us about 20 years ago, one of those to buy it. We're like, no, we put it there.
Allow the property owner to tap on
At the current existing main location.
In an MOU, you want to put in there, the MOU will be created
Yeah.
by our law director
Yeah,
to.
so that part is making.
Get caught up
We
here.
recommend making an exception to section 5 of the water rules and allow the property owner to tap at the existing main location. And,
And it's something if at some point in the future,
and then,
right?
No, I think the MOU needs to be in place before
Yeah.
this goes, so.
Right, well,
And if development happens in the future, so an MOU will be established by our law director, identifying the terms for current property owners to follow with the city of Finley if,
Stop for a second.
I only say it right once.
Jeremy, are the rules such now that if somebody bought that property to the north and never talked to the property owner on the south corner, on the southeast corner, could they force that line in, or is that private?
So they would have to extend that up, but as soon as
But is it
And I
they
guess
have the
coming
right
out.
to, is it private property or is it
it would be right in the right of way.
in the highway right away?
Yeah.
Okay,
It'd
so,
be- it-
so
or the highway easement, whatever you want to call it. So
Township road.
they would extend, but as soon as that property wants it, then there's a rotary that ties them.
no, it's
Contractor establish an MOU, with the property owner, enforcing section 5 of the water rules. In the event the property
To the
north
north
is developed.
I think that gets it done.
And it protects.
Yeah, I mean, the MOU will have, love it. The recommendations just identifying those.
The exception on specifying the
Annual
restriction.
addition. Versus.
here, there. Or my shots. Put them in that office. It's a good place to get shots. So did you replace green? Oh, that's great.
Well, he's in the love green, not this recommendation.
So we recommend making an exception to section 5 of the water rules and allow the property owner to have existing main location. And the water director establish an MOU with the property owner that enforces section 5 of the water. That the property to the north is developed. That is my motion.
Second.
All any questions or comments? All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 I think it's reasonable. You want to be done with my.
Did you vote yes? Good.
Very good. No.
Update on properties within the city limits that are still on septic systems. Take it away.
All right, so Jason, I'll give the high level and then you fill in. You're good with that? All right, so we have narrowed it down to there's 44 water only customers. Out of those, 19 of them have sewer readily available. 5 of them would probably need pump stations or some kind of grinder pump to get them. to our sanitary.
Hold on, 19 is sewer available.
Yep,
Okay. Go ahead. And what was the next?
5 would most likely need pumps.
Okay.
And then 3 of them are just single properties. So where they're just kind of outliers by themselves. The reason why I'd said 3 are single properties is kind of how we broke it up. Because we can really look at this, you can kind of see there's clumps.
Those, that only is 27.
Well, that's, and then I got next one.
Okay.
Right here for you. So then there's pretty much 5 areas where if we do, say, 5 sewer projects, we pick up 17 properties. Throughout that, and then, you know, like, Plains and Strong Avenue, that would pick up 7 or 8 in that area. We got one off of 224 and 212. So there's a couple where it's not just we're running one main line to a parcel, something like that. Because the problem with that is when you have, and why I singled it out as a single property, you can't really run a main line just to one property. Because if we run a main line and we have to maintain it, now it's a different size, it's a different slope that we have to follow. Well, if they're the only user, they're not gonna have enough water to clean that line out. You're in, you know, the blood, pretty much your liquids are gonna pass your solids. And then they're gonna have backup problems. So those are kind of the single outlier ones that are kind of tough for us. That's almost a private lateral. They would have to run for that, but the 5 projects is where I feel safe we could run a main line and tie multiple properties in there to keep it flushed out.
Okay. Can we start at the top and go through them? So you said, so the 44, so 19 is sewer available, so they're right there, so that's just a matter, it's just an enforcement issue.
Yeah, so like one of them would be, we did that sewer project last year.
Yeah, right.
And the new, it's just like finalizing taps within that. There's a couple, and I got them color coded where the greens and yellows are pretty much where they have sewers within the regulations. It was at what, 180 feet? I think 200 feet. So I figure 180 foot. So
So the red
we're actually within the red.
are 19, the 19 that have sewers available? No.
The green and yellow are the ones that like their sewers are available within the regulation. The red ones are pretty much where we're gonna have to have some kind of a main line or project base to get it there. Because it's outside that 200 foot threshold.
Where would the 5 projects be?
So, and I had it on Google Earth, but of course Google Earth doesn't work well over here. So the first project would be over here off of 224 and 212. We could pick up multiple projects or multiple areas within that. Second area is over off of Blanchard and Strong. Third area is off of Tappan, which we're actually working on right now. A fourth project is, you can barely see, but it's down off of Yates, just south side of Emory Adams Park. And then
That's just one house?
there's 2 houses there.
Okay.
And then the 5th project would be just west of Main Street in Hobart kind of area.
Mhm.
There'd be 2 houses that we could pick up within that area. So those were, like I said, I was looking at areas where I know we could get the fall. I know we would have 2 or more houses on there to keep that line. But like some of these in the West Park, like what we talked about, and I kind of worked with the health department on some of those, is we have a sewer decently close by within that, but we do not have the grades to get it. I cannot, pretty much like some of these in this area, I can't run gravity to them. They would have to run a force main to us in order for that to happen. And that's kind of what that Lima Avenue one I know talked about. Is I looked at everything, we went out there and shot grades. The only way they could do it is run a force main. And
Is it within the 200 feet?
no, they were way over the 200 foot. And it just, then you're running a force main, can't put it in the right of way. Because then it's a private line in the right of way and it gets to be a whole bunch of stuff. But so there's some spots where it's just without pumps, it's unachievable. Because of the grades we're at. And, and I haven't looked over in this area, we got a whole clump over there, but, I think it's one of the industrials over there. They are tied into our system, but they ran their own force main up to Williams. So they ran, 1,000 foot, let's say, over to our sewer with the force main. So that's telling me that the reason they ran a force main is because we don't have grade for that. So, like this clump, if we get into looking at distances and depths and all that, it might have to turn into a pump station. And now you're talking a couple $100,000 to pick up 7 houses for a pump station. But then we're gonna want to build it big enough if we ever,
Well, we spent,
develop. So,
we spent a lot more than that in West Park for a couple houses.
well, I mean, you could be looking just for the
Yeah.
pump station itself, $500,000. The Spring Lake one was $750,000 just for that.
Yeah.
So.
Jeremy, quick question. That group right there was that new house.
Yep.
That's being built. Is that included in that?
Yeah, so as of right now, because they're not a water user yet. So that would be, the 8. Right now, there's about 7, I think it was 7, so they would be the 8, but right now, we don't have them at their now, they have water taps, so we don't have record for that yet.
Because I know that was a lot of conversations with that property.
Yeah, yep, and that's what, and I think we talked about that, like, we have sewer there, but it's outside the stretch and I don't know depth wise or anything like that. It looks like we can on paper, from the old 1940 plans, but it's tough to say, until we go out there and actually take survey shots.
Jeremy, is that on a creek? Is that on? What?
We're up here,
That close?
they're just south of it.
Okay, so do we have any pollution issues there in the creek that you guys are monitoring? Or they're not monitoring it regularly enough to know?
Correct. Probably because most of those systems right there are irrigation units.
Yeah, that'd be
So-
my guess too. So
And
that would be your motivation.
And that's, and like, kind of clarify, it's not saying these properties have sewer problems or anything. This is just the ones that are water only users within the city limits.
And
Bad cow day today, so the red dots are what?
Red dots are water only that does not have sewer readily available.
And then the, what looks like more yellowish.
So like the yellow two down here are actually gonna be picked up part of Spring Lake.
Okay,
These two up here are going to be,
Tap.
tapping, we're actually in development plans. I think that's the only yellow ones, and then the green ones are pretty much, there's a sanitary within the 200-foot readily available.
okay.
So the green one's just enforcement. It's there.
Yeah,
They just gotta get on.
Yeah.
So,
so
But it's not that easy.
No,
well, no, I understand,
Right.
but yeah, but it's just a matter, it's there. It's in the rule. They just gotta, at some point.
No, but it's
But we
not
have a
that easy. I mean, the one that, the case that brought this up, the way for them to do it is to go through their neighbor's yard. And put in a grinder pump and the costs are more than the house is worth. So in essence, you force them to do that and they're gonna walk away from their house.
Yeah.
And so that's not an option.
Are all of these grinder pumps though? I mean-
no, there's just 5 of them. It would be
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. And that's just kind of looking at it and how far they are away from the main lines. Possibly 5 over here. This one I kind of already counted out because they were putting a septic system in because it was a lot cheaper than trying to run a force main. And I was good with that because, trying to get a force main and I don't want it right away because no one oops it. When you call it oops, no one marks it out, but the private owner, if they don't mark it out, it gets hit. Now the private owner is fixing it, and I don't want to put private stuff in the right way.
Hard to get your head around all, it's just like, so okay, so you have 5 projects, are
Potential.
are the 5 potential projects, are they reasonably? Is the cost benefit make sense, or you're saying this one didn't make sense because so that one doesn't, that one's an expensive one.
I kind of ran one, to the south there, and it was, I think 230,000 if we did that at our current rates
You
right now.
you told me this one bottom right.
Like, yeah, like if we went in this area to pick up 2
I
houses.
was talking about, you're talking about this one, you're,
Oh, over
this one.
No, that, I'm not sure, if we have to get in,
Okay.
if we can run gravity, it's gonna be cheaper. If I can't get gravity and I gotta run a pump station, you just
Okay. so
double, triple the price.
Okay. All right, so let's put that one aside. How about
Yeah.
the other 4? Did the other 4 make, is there a cost benefit ratio that makes any kind of sense at all that we should consider budgeting those projects? Or,
I think we're gonna be in the same situation like what we talked about street once. I mean, we picked up 4 properties in there and that was over $200,000. You're still gonna be, each foot we run is of sewer line is with asphalt, all that kind of stuff is between 150 and $200 a foot. And that's if we do a small line and we're not too deep and we don't run into rock and all that
all
kind
right,
of
so
stuff.
none of those 5 are like no brainers. We should just do it. I mean, are there any of them that make sense?
Like that one I was talking about down off of Main Street and stuff, it's not hard to do. I mean, it's an easy project for us. It's just, it is inexpensive because you run into a little rock there, it's tight and the depths and all that kind of stuff. to reach those two properties. So if you want to call that a quick one, I don't see that as a hard project. We could get that designed and developed, but you know, you're picking up two properties for $200,000. And getting that repaid, you know, if you're looking for cost benefit, it's going to take a while to get that brought back. Now, if they had failing septic systems and it's polluting and, you know, there might be a little bit more, but I think it's kind of getting in what we've talked about is what point does this, how far do we go if we have failing systems? Is it our responsibility to run to it? Is the property's owner's responsibility to run it type thing? So.
That's one of the points I was gonna bring. You know, we got into this down at the south of town when they ran that line and people had new or really well ran septics. They're like, they just invested a lot of money in a septic and it, you know, has a lifespan on it. And all of a sudden we're saying, it's going in front of your house, you gotta tap into this. They're like,
We're not saying that.
well, just thank you for that. You know, that's what the rule is. And then, so some, you know, I don't know, they're not failing systems to our knowledge. So, and we have a process in place. Well, we don't, the health department has a process in place to monitor this and enforce it. So,
And then, you know, another one would be this up here, because we got, that's a 21 inch main line that runs all the way back to Birch Haven. So, I mean, that's another one. I'm very confident we have the depth, we have the capacity, you know, that would be a simple run, but still, you know, it's still cost. I mean, you're still looking, you know, over $100,000 for that to pick up 4 properties.
Well, that ratio is a little better.
It's a little better,
I
but
mean,
and I mean, we can run quick estimates on them, but it's tough to tell until, you know, like the ones down off of Blanchard stuff. Until you actually get a survey, then you're going to know what depth you are and all that kind of stuff. What the other utilities you got to run into. I mean, the one we ran on West Park, we were good, and all of a sudden we get right across Lime Avenue, and there's an AT&T dump bank there that we were told was deep enough when we had to relocate it. So that, you know, you run into those things that you just don't know, and all of a sudden there's a storm line there, and they're both gravity. Either one likes to be pushed. So you gotta figure out that, you know, there's a lot of relocating with that stuff too. So, you know, we could get quick estimates on it, but I just don't see where you're going to find an easy, you know, look at it and be like where they're going to equal out on it.
so these houses don't have sewers for a reason. Right.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, like
it's probably been looked at it before and they're.
That's not the Birch Haven.
the ones up at Birch Haven is just,
Yeah,
you know, that was extended to Birch Haven, so it was never just brought down. Those houses were there to begin with.
And there's a few houses that have hooked on, but there's a stretch up there in which there's a couple rundown ones and a couple empty lots, and I mean, of all of them, that's the lowest hanging fruit.
Well, should we at least pursue that one? Right now. How do you decide which ones we pursue and which ones we don't, right? I mean, just. Is it driven by cost benefit ratios? How do we decide this?
Is that an environmental,
What's that?
or environmental issue?
For environmentalists, yeah.
I would say, you know, my opinion would be, it would be driven by environmental, or we have multiple failing. Cause you know, like say the ones off Birch Haven, living over there. System that's working good, and then all of a sudden we run a main line down there, then, you know, health department's gonna be saying, hey, there's a system for our regs for health, you know, Ohio Health, you have to tie into it. And well, I got a perfectly good working system. I just put $15,000 into it, and I got to pay another $5,000 to tie into it and collapse my whole system. So, you know, it's kind of one of those, I think it's more of a need basis than, you know, environmental or collapse or failing system basis on that.
But if you're ever doing work up there, that's, it would be, you're opening up the road or you're in that area anyway. At least now you have the knowledge to say, we should look at sanitary extension or because we're there already. I mean, I know in one case, the precipitator all this, my understanding is we ran storm sewer right down the middle of that street and did, and had the street open, and we didn't extend sanitary. At the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's tough to say, you know, you're just opening up the road, throw another pipe in there. I mean, because you're looking at different depths, you're looking at separation distances. You're on the same trench, or you're saying you're on the same road, but they're different trenches, different depths, different requirements, you know. Storm and sanitary go side by side, but you're cutting two different, you're still paying, you don't really, the only thing you're saving on is mobilization cost. You're still gonna have the asphalt replacement, you're still gonna have the cost of the trench.
Just only do it once.
Right, that's what I mean. You save on you save on one contractor mobilizing it. You're saving the headache of having multiple projects within that area. So it is, but it's not a real, you know, huge cost scenario. Now, if we were researching, say, one of these roads, yeah, that would be something I look at and be like, well, are we gonna do it in the next 5 years? Because I don't want to tear up a new roadway type thing. That would be more than just, we're already there, let's extend it type scenario.
And I think from a health department standpoint, if you had that kind of plan and said, hey, Lindsay, this is my plan, we can identify those properties. So if they're coming to us and saying, hey, my system's failed, we can do our best to prevent, you know, the major public health nuisance. So that way they didn't just spend $20,000 on the new system. We can, you know, that would be a little more palatable.
Right.
If we went to this need base that you suggested, you know, environmental or failing systems, that would require a field survey of every system, right? Wouldn't it? I mean, we'd have to,
Yeah.
I mean, you have to go out and look at systems, how old are they, when was the last time it was rebuilt, and then look at the ditch, you can start sampling ditches, I don't know, it's just kind of, or streets rather.
There's requirement now, that, right?
We have the ability to do it if we need to. But do I have the means right at this moment? I mean, I'm not gonna get you answers very quickly. It's gonna get long and drug out.
We sent out a survey to the people we thought were water only to their responses.
Yeah, so that's how we honed this list down,
Okay.
is that we sent out letters to everyone. Either we got responses from them or we called them. And so we did all of our due diligence to validate who had what and
Did we
where.
get 100% validation then from either a self-response or us contacting them?
Yes, but not everybody knew. So then we also worked with engineering, and Greg dug through and validated and verified some taps and some permit numbers and things like that. So to the best of our ability of everything we were capable of doing, this is the most comprehensive. Because I even went to the health department, got their list with their addresses, cross-referenced that with our lists before we sent out all of that, before we sent the letters out to all of them.
Did any of the 44 say that we would like to have sewers, and if you did, I would tap it?
I don't believe we asked
No.
that.
Okay.
We were just validating whether or not they have septic systems or they were on city
She had the feeling that any of them, like, you talk about, oh, my system is failing. Did we have, and we, not necessarily, okay.
No,
You think you'd get that phone call, or do you think?
I was gonna say, I'm gonna guess that
That would
she would get that phone call.
But do you have a sense of, of those 44, do you think some are failing, or do we have
Oh,
any sense of?
I'm sure if we go pulling out the records, we could get a sense.
So you have documents on every septic system that goes in, every leach field?
Since 1977, we have a fairly good database. Keep in mind, some of our more current things did get lost in 2007 when the flood happened
Yeah.
even. But we have obviously anything gets a permit today. We know. Jeremy, another quick question. Are all these dots residential or any of those?
All of it.
Well, the days to go.
Oh, besides.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's a couple
Dance, I forgot about Dance Studio and TSC.
and Trevor's. Okay.
Yeah, those
There's
were
a
the,
couple commercial out,
Yeah.
I think.
yeah, those were the only two
Yeah,
commercial.
everything else
I
was
recall those. Thank you.
The three. But you guys have a recommendation for us, or we're just still shooting on data?
I don't have a recommendation.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Grader, but we were requested to bring this to you and just kind of have a conversation
So we
about it.
said, we have data, and we're just trying to understand it now.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is more refined than it was when we started this a couple of years ago. So we're in a better spot.
I mean, we can come up with high level estimates for those 5 areas. You can kind of look at, this area is gonna cost X amount of money and you're gonna pick up 5 properties. Or whatever.
How do you help the 19 that have sewer available? Tab.
No, I mean, those would be larger scale projects or pumps, or, it would be a lot more digging in. The 5 projects that I identified.
Of the 19 that have sewer available,
Oh,
that
how,
currently have, how do we help them get on?
To me, okay.
I mean, you could be an a-hole and just force them.
right,
Then we have the situation that I brought up.
But what if we said, I don't know, so you're not allowed to rebuild your leach field. I mean, when that expires, to the point where it's failed, and so you have to have some criteria when it fails, you're not allowed, you must tap it at them.
That's
That's already in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be okay with letting it run its natural life of that, whatever the usable life of that septic system.
But Ohio Administrative Code doesn't agree with you.
Yeah.
And there's still a burden on these, on the citizens or on the homeowners, property owners that there's a reason they have tapped.
Mhm.
Either blind ignorance, willful ignorance, cost. And I think the criteria just based on distance is a false criteria. You have to have something, but 200 feet for one is not the same as 200 feet for another. In the one case I'm thinking of, the only way to do it is to go. You think they can do that gravity?
yeah, you would have to, you wouldn't be able to. You would have to come from the north, bring it south. That'd be,
No, they're going, they would have to flush and go north.
yeah, it would be all flowing north.
And that would be 20 feet down, going through their neighbor's property. Well, about right.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty deep because,
I'm not following this conversation.
Yeah.
Whatever you guys are talking.
yeah, I don't want to name out properties.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm trying to keep base, but
Right.
the instance he's talking about is how deep where they would have to tie in, then it comes in with outside drops and stuff like, because of how deep the sewer is, you can't be so, 2 feet, more than 2 feet above the outlets or, without some kind of a drop system. So that way you don't have all this sewer dropping 10 feet down. That's a state regulation or EPA regulation. So, they're going out there now, they get it, they can run flat, then all of a sudden, when they gotta go down, they gotta run outside drops and it's very costly on that kind of stuff. But yeah, when you have deep sewer, it's not just an easy tie-in type situation on that. But, and then you're running into different grades where
It's all residential.
this is residential where you have a sewer that's
Yeah.
to Main Street, but it's actually higher than what the invert of that sewer is actually higher than their house.
Yeah.
Because of the grade difference. So they would have to flow back to the deeper one to make it work.
There's just no way, there's no easy answers here.
There's not.
So, yeah, so the 19 is sewer available. If The letter of the law says they got 2 years to tap in once.
If the letter of the law puts people,
So I
puts
understand,
people out of their
I'm
house.
just trying to understand what the letter of the law, is. So.
I mean, simple saying the answer for that to it, if you want those 19 units forced in, pretty much force them to tie in.
I don't think any of us want.
And
to
I
do
don't,
that.
I agree.
So how do you
I
get
agree.
around that? I mean, if the law says,
Well, that's not, that's Lynch's job.
And I know we've had conversations about financial, ability and whatnot. And we've had funding in the past to help individuals. I'm not sure that funding is gonna be there though as we progressive in 26.
Yeah.
It's just not looking like.
And
does
we,
that funding go through you or through us?
The funding actually goes through regional planning.
And in this situation, regional planning, this one particular case. The coverage is only for on the homeowner's property. It doesn't cover the 197 feet off of property that is all the construction thing. It's that portion of it that they walk away from their house. So things complicated. I guess on the 5 projects or these potential projects that you. Actually, no, I have one other, before I go there, I have one other. Kind of philosophical, we're doing sewer repair replacement on. I think Summit, line or someplace over there.
Yeah, some of them.
Yeah, let's say, so, but we're doing sewer repair replacement there. What's the difference between that project and any of these 5 projects we're talking there?
because what we're doing on Summit is already our system that we have to maintain to make sure we keep flow in our system. Where the other ones are, they're not on our system, it's not our system yet. We're not accepting any of their flows where when we're fixing on like Summit Street or something like that. We have to do it to ensure that we maintain flow through our pipes.
Do you loop sewer sanitary like you loop? No. That's looping, is it never done? Or is it?
No,
You need pressure, right?
yeah, no, it's not gonna help. I mean, you really size your pipe to what it can hold
Yeah.
capacity wise. Where looping with water lines, because the pressure is you're pulling for different. I mean, with the gravity system, you pretty much just run downhill, take a small pipe to a bigger pipe, to a bigger pipe, to a bigger pipe, and that's what you put.
How many sewer accounts do we have?
I'm sorry.
How many sewer accounts do we have? What you say?
Well, we have roughly between 18 and 19,000 service accounts. So these, I mean, so you just take these roughly 50 or so out of that total number.
So it's like 0.2%.
I mean, but this is also just city property. I mean, obviously, we have a lot of water only accounts outside of the city proper as well. That aren't,
And that's a whole different.
that's a whole.
That's not our issue.
No, no, sewer
Right,
line.
so
down
within the
one.
city, we're talking about 0.2% of the accounts are non-compliant.
Here's a question that you can't answer. In these 5 projects or any of this, how many, landlocked lots become developable if we have sanitary availability? Yeah, and I know you didn't analyze it, so I'm not looking for.
But I guess as you look at those 5
That's
projects,
another way to look at it.
your point, if you look at 5.
Well, and maybe, well, but not
Yeah.
really.
I mean, I could see 2 areas, but you know, like the one off Blanchard Strong, it wouldn't be in that area. It'd be everything
Yeah.
southeast of that,
That's right.
where we would open up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the purchase would be more going
Yeah.
north.
Yeah, which that's already mainline there
Right.
anyways.
Yeah.
So you would just be picking up theirs. I would say there would be one of them I know.
That would be part of your evaluation. If we
Right.
spent, looking at those 5 projects, it seems like that's really the only action item out of this.
There's really two directions. Is what did you do with the 19 and then for the 3 projects? Or the 5 projects covering the 17? Do they somehow get on your actual project list as something for consideration? When you get everything else done.
Well, then I guess as you're evaluating
But-
those 5 projects, you gotta kind of look at the environmental effects. So are they failing systems? You know, those 17 might be worth a look-see to see if they're on the verge.
But I think looking at, you know, potential long-term then, I think that's getting outside of this group and kind of getting into more, you know, like kind of what the mayor's talking about. Cause say someone develops to the southeast of that and they need sanitary sewer and they're within the city limits, they're gonna have to run our main line out to them. And they're putting the pump station in, they're putting all that infrastructure and then turn it over to us where we don't have that cost. So, you know, you're looking at, okay, one, do we put, and I'm just saying a pump station, because I'm assuming, say,
Right.
are we putting the big costs up and then hopefully someone develops that, or do we let someone have the development and we work with them on the cost of, you know, and that's I think a totally different conversation than what this group is.
Yeah, that's not what. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then you're, yeah, you know, you're getting in a whole different mess. So I guess to kind of circle back around, we can, with the 5 projects, we can come up with high level estimates on what we see, kind of what you guys talk about, and I mean, we can bring back to you guys so you can
Try to
kind of
see.
see what it looks like.
And those 17 that are involved in this 5, just to see they're failing, just kind of environmental.
Yeah,
impact, if
we
that's
can
potential
work with the health department
Of those
on that.
17.
Give us some time on that, so that way they can pull some of that, but we can pull that information around.
So we get these things flushed out on the ground is. And then what do you do with them is, do you then start trying to put them on the capital plan if, or
That makes sense.
or is it? I don't know how something becomes a project into the project funnel for sewer. But to me, in my mind, these are potential projects, and at the point in time where they need to get flushed out is when you spend the time and energy to do so.
I mean, from my standpoint, if they would like, for capital planning wise, if say, I'm just gonna say the Birch Haven area, say those people down through, majority of them or most of them are saying, hey, we have a failing system. You know, I don't want to replace the septic system. Will you run it? You know, then if that would be where it's the environmental issue, it's the need for it. I don't want to run something just to say I ran it in a cap, you know, having capital just to run it, because then we're the ones that placed it, almost forcing the hand, where then it, you know, we're not forcing it, but it's getting turned over, where I would put it in capital plan when there's a need purpose and a need. pretty much for it. I gotta, that's what we try to do with all our projects is what's the purpose, what's the need for that.
But in that's using that as a specific case, then it's gonna take some action on somebody's part to assess the environmental stability of those things and gather more information to potentially get it out of the capital plan.
Right.
So that if we just say, oh, we've identified the 5 areas and we walk away from it, nothing's gonna happen. So there would be, so you're, in that situation, you are saying we need to gather a little bit more information on environmental impact, I like the environmental stability of these systems and whether they're worth our attention.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot more like than just these are the areas, this is where the sewer goes. It's going to have to be, is there a need? Is there what's then, there's a lot of back end work that we have to do before we just start putting buckets.
And you can prioritize the 5.
And you could.
I mean, you don't have to wait till all 5 are flushed out to come.
Well,
back
and
to
we
us.
could get
There's-
high cost estimates on all these and
Yeah.
you can look and say, hey, this one right now off the bat, from a high number standpoint, looks like it'd be the most beneficial. Let's investigate on that one.
So,
And then here's 2, here's 3, here's 4, here's 5.
But I don't even know that he has to come back anyway. I mean, they
Oh.
didn't come to us to say, let's do Summit.
Sure.
They have their pipeline or their project funnel and
well, I'd like to hear what's going on.
And that's where the pollution
Yeah.
department comes and talks and prioritizes plans or
what we're
projects.
trying to, what we're, as a water and sewer committee is that this is something that we wanted to investigate. You've given us more information, you've identified 5 projects, I think we would still say, we think this is worth continued looking
Mhm.
at. And potentially those projects find a way to the capital plan if it makes sense, taking into account environmental issues, cost benefit, et cetera.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, so our recommendation is to pursue 5 projects at a high level and then just continue discussions on the rest.
That sounds great. Uh,
Develop high level cost estimates and benefit ratios on 5. Okay.
I'll wait. Specifically, mitigation. It's funny.
Develop high level cost estimates and benefits on the 5 potential projects for further discussion. I'm not ready for a motion.
Sounds good. I'll make that motion.
Josh, that is really a motion.
I second.
And that was just really a second. All in favor of Josh's great motion, please say aye. I say aye. And it is done.
Yes.
No, I do it, right? Letter of financial.
So what we have.
What are we starting on?
So we have the Jason's, the utility billing,
year-to-date financials, I think we can go past this. It basically is, if we've shared in the past, we're gonna provide this quarterly.
Yep.
And it just shows the cadence of the different years, expense versus revenues. I don't know if there's a lot of detail we want to go into this, but we wanted to show it to you. But the pro formas are really where I think the discussion we wanted to have around where we're at currently, as well as where we anticipate looking forward, some of the things that we're gonna have to anticipate having discussions about, at least presenting this to you and then having you guys debate if there's just changes that we're gonna have to make or choose to make.
Well, remember, for the process we developed, we'll have that conversation.
Q3.
This is just a kind of a status report.
Yeah, so
Really, everything in these graphs, we're on sewer right now, everything is flowing as we anticipated. There was in May, there was a transfer of funds from pollution, water pollution or sewer, as well as water to utility billing.
Walk me through these, we don't have. graphs there.
wait,
So what is the blue and what is the orange?
let me go back to water.
So this is our expense to revenue comparison for year over year, and the expense is blue. The orange, the revenue is orange. And when we were looking at making a change to the water rates back 2-3 years ago, we had this discussion. We put all these graphs together and with data and forecast and projections. And we didn't really have anything that showed the cadence of the year. So we put these together, and then we wanted to show not only the historical of expense to revenue comparison month over month as we went through the year, but then when we made the rate change in 24, we wanted to show how things were going to flow. And as you can see, then you start seeing these big ticket items that actually hit expense, because capital as well as operating are in these funds. So it's a little different than your general fund budgets. So that's where, like, this is just kind of a flow of 23. You see how the cadence worked. And then when you have those big spikes, we have the identifiers to show what those look like. And then over on the right-hand side of this, it just shows the expense total compared to revenue and then your difference. Again, 24, when we actually had the rate revenue actually hit in April, based on the cadence of the bills, it did exactly how we projected it to do. I mean, the expense bumped up a little bit and then things kind of settled out. And then in 25, again, revenue's been pretty consistent, and expenses, we have identified what actually caused the spike in the expenses. So again, the operational transfer, Jason dug into that because it's not something that he necessarily anticipated to hit in May. And that's something that he was gonna worked and figured that out, and it has to happen. I mean, it's a cadence of the back chart or the back charge back to the appropriate budgets, but that's something we want to work through to make sure we can anticipate that versus surprise, it's in your budget this month versus actually seeing it coming or anticipating when it happens. It has to happen. It's just a matter of knowing when it's going to hit. So that's what these graphs were built for. So you can have a visual as you march through the year. So we have it for the water as well as sewer and storm. Oh, yeah, that's storm. Correct.
And these are total expenses and total revenues. Not, these can't compare to the bill because there's other revenue that comes in other than just what comes in from the utility bills. So these are, I always like to point out that these are the totals from Munis. Not, and they don't correlate to the front half of the report.
So again, this is just the month-to-month report that Jason and his team put together. So we have a comprehensive report that shows all the different flows of dollars, expenses and revenues and actually how they're actually captured. So in utility billing, obviously, there's a lot of moving parts with that, with the different cycles of billing, with water shut off potentials and everything, and that's the front end of this report. So a lot of information that wasn't necessarily aired out in the public, and then when we were gonna make a change, it was a big surprise. Like, wait a minute, we haven't changed rates in so many years. What do you know, why now? And, we like our low rates and we had to tell the story on, well, we pushed capital down the road, so we didn't have to do this and we still have to maintain our operating costs, et cetera, et cetera. So having these visuals and seeing the cadence of the history as well as we march through the years shows an anticipation of, hey, we see this coming down the road and we're going to have to bring it to you based on what fund it is or what rate it is, that either I'm going to bring a recommendation as we set the process up, or there might, with sewer and storm, it's more of a legislative process. So again, every time we have a water and sewer, you're going to see this. We are including this on the quarterly basis in the council packet. Like you do with KPIs.
And those numbers don't match these numbers because why?
So those pro formas is pretty much like we talked about. Q1 will have your actual from previous year and then your budgeted numbers for the current year. And then I have not changed going through there, because if you go with where you're at right now, then you'll have to annualize out what that is. So that's where our third quarter is where we're going to find that. So you kind of use both of these.
But I'm just like looking at stormwater actual revenue 2024, 800,693, or it's 806,934. And the operating expenses is 320,506 here, and it's 248,742 there.
So
That's what I don't understand.
So what I use, or what we use in the pro forma is what is coming from his book, from Jim's book.
It's budget based.
Budget based.
It's not,
So-
that's modified accrual up there.
Yeah, so what we use in that is what is actual, so that way we can compare, hey, when we were actually, what you guys what numbers were presented with you guys in December, January, then at the end of the year, how did those compare? So we went from what was budgeted, hard numbers and approved, to what actual numbers are, where it's.
That's the flaw in how budgetary law. I know presenting long-term looks, you have to do it based on calendar budget projections, which are cash based. Everything you have to project out in terms of history, you do based on modified accrual, and that's why your act for is different budgets. And it's a pain in the butt, but it's government and it's important to do it with rare exception. I have a question for you, Jeremy. In looking at this, for some reason, the state did not require us to make stormwater a separate fund. I don't know if they didn't anticipate growing like it did or whatever happened. Irregardless, we do that operations transfer every year, stormwater restricted account to your sewer operations. Is there value? Would you in me researching whether or not pause that transfer to accumulate cash in your storm fund, particularly since you have high cash balances and high revenue coming to the sewer fund, to bulk up cash in your storm fund for major projects down?
I don't think at this point, I would say,
Because it'd be about
yes or no.
300,000 a year.
Once we get the long-term control plan done, we're gonna have a better idea of what's going to happen, because I don't want to pause our.
Well, I'm not suggesting, I
No, you know what I mean, where
research.
you're using more of your sewer fund for that. I wouldn't, or your sanitary portion of it for that, and I don't want to without having knowns yet, because there's a lot of
And
unknowns.
I'm not suggesting you do it, I'm just saying.
I know, I'm just saying, I see what you're saying. I'm just saying, I don't think at this point I can give you a yes or no answer. I think it's something we can consider, but we need to know what the park projects are.
Well, I don't know if it's legal. That's why I said I
Oh.
have to research the financial side to see if it's an option.
Right. It would have to be a discussion once we get long-term mutual plan.
So I can check and see if it's even legal. And then when you get to that, say, hey, Jim,
Yeah, like, hey, this would help us out, this is what our rough costs are. That would be a consideration.
and hopefully that makes sense to you guys. In other words, your stormwater is it's within the sewer fund. It's a fund. So
And
I can state that.
in the fifth page of this, the stormwater fund forecast with revenue guidance changes. Given 2026 revenue change.
So those are not proposed. Okay, so with our long-term control plan, we're going to look at the rates as well. What I was doing with that is I was taking our formulas that we were using when we first, a couple years ago when we did that, and see how we could have the least amount of impact throughout. So instead of having a 10% or 20% or whatever, I was trying to make it, throughout there, and in order for that to have the ripple effect back in 28, that time zone, you have to start earlier to accumulate that cash. So pretty much if you look, so 26.
He was on storm. Sorry, do you want to
No,
know storm or you
No,
want?
he's on water.
No, I'm on storm.
Oh, you're-
But look at water, how you did this. You have a line-
Same.
you have a line that says revenue change, revenue charge for rate change, and it goes out to 2031, and if you go to storm,
Yeah.
You only have 1 year.
you only have 1 year, and then it flows up into the top line.
Good.
Yeah, so with that is we looked at on how our structure is with our storm rates. And we were looking at possibly restructuring how the storm is. And with that rate change that we have in 26 is we could restructure all our commercial and industrial and pretty much put them in a different category, and it would be easier actually to track on my end as well. But then you wouldn't have to touch your residential areas. So you're kind of 1.5 acres below that are your residential areas identified as residential, you wouldn't have to touch. But if we restructure where your classification is on your storm, and I mean, I don't have it with me, but we kind of have a breakdown on what that would look like. You would change their cost of what their cost would be instead of paying, X amount. You would change a little bit, it would increase it. But if you look at compared to what our storm rates are compared to anyone around us, and the way we looked at it is we looked at big box stores that are going to be cookie cutters no matter where you go.
Yep.
They build them here, they build them in Lima. We look at that way, but we changed more of our industrial and commercial instead of our residential. And that's kind of where we got that rate where we could change them around and actually get an increase with that, and it would help us out throughout. So if we made that change, say next year, then it will have that because we're accumulating.
So it's not necessarily a rate change, it's a calculation change. On how you
It's a
assess.
rate change. It will be a rate change for your
them.
commercial and industrial.
It
All
cleans, it cleans up some of the categories that we already have. It trims them up and it reclassifies them so it's cleaner to tell a commercial what
Right.
they're gonna be charged. So
We're just looking at.
Yeah, that's-
When do you expect long-term control plan to be? When do you think we're seeing something from that?
For sewer, it's going to be early 26.
Okay.
I mean, all that depends on how EPA, how long it takes them to review and us back and forth with them. On that.
From the previous charts, though, back to the different question. We think financially and expense wise, we are on track for what we had budgeted, and where we expected to be
We're back on sewer. What are we talking?
overall.
yes, where we predicted the rate change.
For water.
It's for water, it's performing, the results are exactly what we said. It's gonna be.
And for-
It's storm. For sewer, we are in a strong position and things are trending fine. We do not anticipate coming to you and asking for any recommendations for the storm. I'm sorry, for sewer.
Even with the long-term control?
Sewer.
Comes,
We don't anticipate that.
okay.
But I also, that plan's gonna tell us. So, but our sewer fund's in a healthy position. Our storm fund, we anticipate that there's gonna be potential need or discussion about a rate change in the future, and that's where we've been doing some of this preliminary work. And that's why we wanted to bring these 10-year forecasts to you, because as we experienced with the water rate change, and we had these philosophical discussions back then, it's like, do we have this big change, and we wait 5 or 6 years and have another big change based on what the needs are, or you do slow incremental changes? And that's really same discussion for all the funds. So, I mean, do you want those incrementals or the slow incremental change and it's less of a hit, or you wait and you make a 10-year change?
That's a conversation for Q3.
It is, but you have the forecast you see, and to the auditor's recommendation, the forecast should not have a negative variance on it. We feel you need to see the negative variance, but then that's why the second page is provided to show that we have a plan that we can execute and discuss with you to make that not be a negative variance.
And to your question, so we just have a brief numbers just in case. Sewer currently today, not considering any future legislation capital, budgetarily speaking, unappropriated, it's unappropriated. It's cheap. Sewer stuff is 60.
Okay, so I guess on the water, what's gonna drive it is the master plan.
It will.
And so we'll know that in a year. So, I mean, that's what,
18 months.
Yeah, year to year.
well, they told us they'd be done with their study in a year. That's what they told us, our Kingston, so a
Okay,
year from
a
now,
year.
I mean, right, okay, but, okay, so next spring and then next fall, that's what's gonna drive that change.
Yes.
So, okay. So what is gonna drive the change for stormwater? Is it the reservoir, the dry basin?
I think some of the projects that we're gonna have that we anticipate with storm, and then of course, we did factor in, because it's in the plan, the dry basin maintenance is in here. So that's another thing that we were considering, so. I mean,
Is there a report that's gonna come to, is there anything that there's no, the long-term control plan, does that drive stormwater?
There'll be a component of storm.
Yeah, I was gonna say there'd be storm projects in the long-term control plan.
Okay,
Because
so
obviously,
that's the driver for change.
it is some anticipated big equipment, there's some equipment in there that's gonna drive some of that cost associated as well. So, yeah, there's the basin, the maintenance of the basin's in there, a couple of big ticket capital projects. I think that some of the separation, when we actually have the stormwater that's hitting actually our system. So there will be projects that will actually create capacity, and some of it's gonna be
And are
storm,
those-
some.
Are those projects identified in these stormwater forecasts right now? Or,
So all of our capital, 10-year capital plan that we have, it's all been provided. Those numbers are all in here. So if it's in the 10-year capital plan, it ties back to this.
but it could change when you get that,
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
So that would be the driver.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. But right now, this forecast doesn't cover, I mean, it's going into red, so it doesn't cover your anticipated, even without that report, right? Stormwater.
So for instance, if you go to water,
We do nothing.
if you
Right.
keep everything as is today with anticipated increases with expenses, as well as our 10-year capital plan as is, you don't change a rate. Those red markers are where you're gonna be in a deficit. And it's to the minimum reserves that are required by the EPA, which is really only 90 months, I'm sorry, 90 days, 3 months, which that I think is a little lean for reality, but that's.
What if the dry basin didn't have, so I mean, I guess I hate the rate increase if the funding for that didn't come through and where, for whatever reason, the dry basin doesn't have.
The funding's there for that. Yeah, that's that project.
I guess we'll know by September for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
certain industry standard ratio of, for example, on a water fund of or water operations of operating expenses to revenue that is considered range that you want to have your expenses in.
I can find out. I don't, Jason, do you know that?
Yeah, and it's at the bottom of the, so every year I have to submit a community matrix to the agency. And I literally just did that yesterday, and they actually have the ratio printed out with and I didn't bring that one.
I just think of,
Would that be something you'd like to have on there?
yeah,
Yes.
where it's appropriate, if it drives, if it, especially if it ties to the organizational goals or your metrics that you operate on. Especially if you're trying to benchmark the X percent and we're above or below it or whatever, I think that becomes information I want to that I think is relevant. Also, is there an implied inflation rate in here?
Yes, I
Yes.
believe
I
so.
think we were pretty,
I think state that on the sheet.
Just down
Yeah.
the bottom.
we can add, because
Yeah.
you don't see the little, comment sections when it
Yeah.
prints out. They're
Yeah.
applied.
But where you say capital expenses, assume those grants, inflation assumption,
But it's, I think it's two, we're pretty modest.
yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of room
I
for.
mean, this thing will evolve, but the ratios, only if they tie to benchmarks that from an industry standpoint are relevant. And then, of course, then what's the relevant industry benchmark and then where we do them. And folks, I gotta be on the CD47, so I have to look together.
No problem.
Thank you for the feedback. Input.
No other business before us. We'll call this meeting at 6:37.
Lindsay?
There is no committee report on that last item because. There's. Meeting adjourned.
Yes.
Meeting.
I'm killing it.
Thank you.
Well,